Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into a really fascinating analysis from PINE+RAIN Studio that is going to completely challenge everything you think you know about the so-called generation gap. We're going to unpack the myth of generational labeling and, more importantly, look at the hidden, everyday costs it extracts from our society.
So let's just start with a super simple question. Are you just your birth year? Have you ever felt, totally boxed in or unfairly judged strictly because of the year you happen to be born? The media constantly pushes this idea that an entire demographics character can be just neatly reduced down into these 20-year buckets. Think about that superficial millennial avocado toast trope that was absolutely everywhere in the 2010s. What that did was take a massive cohort of people who were dealing with skyrocketing urban rents, and it completely flattened their very real economic struggles into a joke about a frivolous brunch order. It's a really convenient narrative, sure, but as we're going to see, it is deeply and dangerously flawed.
Here is how we're going to break it all down in this explainer. We'll start with the generational illusion, then look at the compositional fallacy, followed by smokescreens and workplace conflicts, the digital border, the lost elder, and finally, reclaiming the individual.
All right, kicking things off with Section 1, the generational illusion and the push for the standardized human. The crucial point we have to grasp right out of the gate is that generational labels rely heavily on what sociologists call essentialism. That's basically the assumption that just because you were born in a specific year, you automatically have a specific set of internal values. It completely strips away your individual agency. It's very much like a scriptive identity, where traits assigned to you at birth are used to predict your entire behavior. It's honestly like saying everyone born on a Tuesday inherently loves the color blue. It makes no sense. Instead of looking at who you actually are, society tries to standardize you through this artificial tribalism.
Moving right along to Section 2, the compositional fallacy, or economics masquerading as biology.
This brings up a brilliant point made by sociologist Bobby Duffy in his work, The Generation Myth. He highlights something called the compositional fallacy. Think about folks who lived through the 1930s. We often define them by their extreme frugality, right? But that frugality wasn't some biological trait hardwired into their DNA just because of when they were born. Not at all. It was a completely rational, necessary response to surviving a global economic depression. We constantly make this mistake. We take the economic realities of a specific era and accidentally assign them as inherent moral traits to the people who just happened to live through it. Which leads us into Section 3, smokescreens and workplace conflicts, and how these labels end up hiding the real issues. Categorizing people this way totally shatters the media's big wealth gap mirage. Grouping everyone by birth year is basically a smokescreen. It allows society to ignore much more relevant realities, like class or regional culture. We constantly hear boomers talked about as this massive monolith of inherited wealth, and Gen Z as this uniform block of digital activists. But let's look at reality for a second. A low-income rural boomer and a low-income Gen Z worker living in the exact same town, they actually have infinitely more in common with each other than either of them do with a billionaire tech mogul of their own age. Generational labels hide our true shared struggles. We actually saw this exact thing back in 1976 when Tom Wolfe wrote about the Me Decade. It was just a temporary cultural trend of self-obsession, but the media froze it into a permanent prejudice, basically labeling a whole generation as inherently narcissistic.
And, this spills over disastrously into our careers. According to research from the National Academies of Sciences, using these kinds of labels in the workplace actually increases conflict. It creates this wildly toxic cycle. Organizations categorize the generations, they train managers to treat a millennial differently than a Gen Xer, and by doing that, they inadvertently codify stereotypes into official policy. So what happens? It creates a self-fulfilling prophecy. Employees just start acting out the caricatures that were assigned to them, and it fosters massive division where there really didn't need to be any.
Now onto Section 4, the digital border, or the architecture of division. When you weaponize group grievances like this, it naturally leads to the creation of borders between us. Remember the viral OK Boomer trend from 2019? That is a perfect case study in soft tribalism. When someone uses that phrase, it's not a logical argument. It is quite literally a shut-down command. It's meant to signal your allegiance to your in-group of age-mates while totally dehumanizing the out-group and cutting off any chance of real dialogue. And sure, it started as just an internet meme, but it permanently damages real-world communication because it actively discourages empathy across age lines. This brings us to a stark, honestly heartbreaking shift that's taken place in our culture. Historically, society was built on vertical continuity. Picture a deeply rooted family tree where grandparents, parents, and children all intimately shared wisdom and community up and down that vertical lineage. But today, that tree has basically been chopped down, and it's been replaced by horizontal tribalism. Generationalism tells us we should isolate ourselves into these little age-mate bubbles. We're taught to only feel solidarity with people our exact same age, which literally builds a digital border right through the middle of our own living rooms.
This disruption leads us to Section 5, the lost elder.
So, historically, Western norms were built on a life stage model. The elder was a highly functional role of stewardship. It was this position of immense respect because wisdom was seen as the accumulation of years. Picture a grandfather teaching a grandson how to hunt or trade. It was this beautiful, seamless transfer of culture. Today, though, that model has been entirely replaced by the digital native narrative. This modern narrative assumes that younger people possess superior inherent knowledge strictly because of the tech they grew up with. But seriously, when did we decide that knowing how to navigate an iPad made you wiser than someone with 6 decades of actual lived experience? It creates this weird technological caste system that frames the new as inherently better, completely severing that historic connection between youth and experience. We basically took the respected elder and downgraded them into the demographic target boomer. And this deep cultural loss echoes a massive warning from sociologist Karl Mannheim. Way back in his 1923 essay, The Problem of Generations, he argued that while generations certainly can drive social change, they become pathological when they lose touch with the integrated heritage of the past. When we start viewing history as just a series of disconnected drops, like Boomer, then Gen X, then Gen Z, rather than a continuous stream flowing together, we completely lose our sense of collective responsibility to one another.
Let's wrap things up with Section 6, reclaiming the individual and moving beyond the birth year. By categorizing human beings into these rigid 20-year buckets, which, let's not forget, are concepts literally borrowed from marketing departments just to sell us stuff, we're making a deeply tragic trade. We are swapping the amazing richness and nuance of individual character for the lazy convenience of stereotypes. We are trading the proven stability of a vertical family lineage for highly volatile horizontal tribes. And ultimately, these labels don't actually help us understand each other better at all. They just give us a specialized vocabulary so we can dismiss each other. So, as we conclude this explainer, here is the big question I want to leave you pondering. What do we actually lose when we trade individual character for a convenient stereotype? This whole generational obsession we have is a massive warning sign of a society that's losing its ability to see the individual. The true danger we face today isn't that we belong to different generations. It's that we have allowed ourselves to be convinced that our birth year is the most important thing about us. Thank you so much for joining me to break down this fascinating topic, and I really hope it helps you see right past the labels the next time someone tries to put you in a generational box.